Greetings, my dear viewer. This is a channel about marital infidelity and about the consequences if one spouse starts to cheat on the other. If you, as well as I do, support true family values and condemn cheating, then subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. Let's get started. My name's Jack. No kidding. I'm a big guy, so folks started calling me Big Jack, kind of like that old Jimmy Dean song from the 60s. I don't work in a mine, but I do build houses. Swinging hammers and hauling lumber has built me up pretty well. I'd probably hold my own against that fictional Jack in a strength contest, though it'd be a close call. No, we don't use air hammers. My boss is old school, takes pride in craftsmanship. Every house we build, he treats as if he's going to live in it himself. He loves to brag that we've driven every single nail by hand, securing each joint personally. Does that make the house any better? No clue. But I do know people can't wait to hire us, and as long as they're lining up, I keep getting paid, and that paycheck covers the finer things, including keeping my wife Chloe happy, because she sure loves to show off. One more thing about me. You'll see why it matters soon. I've never lost an arm wrestling match. Not once. Made a fair bit of money from guys convinced they could outgrip me. Now, about Chloe. We've known each other since childhood. I still remember the first time I saw her, this petite blonde who completely knocked me off balance. Winning her over wasn't easy. She ran with the popular crowd, the football players, the guys with new cars every couple of years, always throwing money around on fancy nights out in Savannah. And before you ask, yeah, I know technically they weren't allowed in clubs before 18, but when you've got connections, rules tend to blur. Back then, Chloe was with a guy named Grant King. Everyone called him Brick. If you don't get why, you might be too young for this story, so maybe go play some ball or something. Chloe was smitten with him, and I figured I didn't stand a chance. I let it go until years later, after college, when she came back home and saw the same guys still grinding away at life. The first time we ran into each other again was at Adams Pharmacy. She had just graduated and was working as an assistant manager at the bank. It was her half-day off, and she'd stop by for a milkshake from their old-fashioned soda fountain. I paid for both of ours. She squinted at me, trying to place my face. "I know you from school, right? You played football?" she asked. "I just can't remember your name." "Not football. I was too busy studying and helping my mom with bills." Her eyes widened. "Jack? Jack Turner?" She stared like she'd seen a ghost. "You won't believe this, but I had the biggest crush on you until junior year. I was too shy to say anything. You probably never noticed me." I was floored. This stunning woman, a dead ringer for a young Nicole Kidman, had a crush on me? Then I noticed. No ring on her finger. This time, I wasn't about to miss my chance. "How about a dance at the American Legion hut next Friday?" I asked. I nearly fell over when she said yes. From that night, we were inseparable. 9 months later, we were married. To me, she was the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen. We settled just outside town, in a house hidden deep in the woods, so secluded you'd never find it unless you knew it was there. Living out there had its perks. No door-to-door salespeople, plenty of space for the kids to run free. The only real threat was the occasional snake, but our German pointer mix, Bruno, made sure no snake, or anything else for that matter, got close. 2 legs or 4 if you weren't welcome, Bruno made sure you regretted stepping foot on our land. He'd lay down his life for our kids. Life was good. A wife who adored me as much as I adored her. 2 kids I was proud of. Money was never a worry. And the one thing that gnawed at me when we first got married? Well, I got over that a long time ago. I know what you're thinking. So let's get it out of the way. That whole myth about a man's size being tied to his hands and feet. Absolute nonsense. Sure, I'm bigger than most guys, but where it counts, I'm just about average. Just over 6 inches long, 1.5 inches in diameter. Not comparing myself to athletes or soldiers, but from what I've read, that's pretty standard. Early in our marriage, I was self-conscious. Chloe had dated a guy named Meat before me, and I worried about how I measured up. No pun intended. but she always reassured me that I knew exactly what I was doing. I even did some research, learned how to make sure she was satisfied. And let's just say, if she wasn't enjoying herself, she was putting on an Oscar-worthy performance, because to this day, she's never complained about a single kiss we've shared. People see me as tough, hardened by life's trials, but beneath that exterior, I've always had a tender spot, perhaps too tender, especially when it came to Chloe. I found it nearly impossible to refuse her anything. On the rare occasions I did, her tears would break me down without fail. I simply couldn't bear to see a woman cry. Maybe that weakness stemmed from watching my mother cry too often. But if there's one thing I've never been good at, it's recognizing when love is a lie. It never occurred to me that Chloe might be dissatisfied with our life together, not until that night in 2011. My usual routine involved heading to Nick's bar with my buddies, tossing back beers, playing pool, and shooting the breeze until midnight. That was the plan, and that was what Chloe expected. But that night, something felt different. Instead of spending hours at the bar, I found my thoughts drifting back home to the woman waiting for me. So, after barely an hour, just as the last hints of daylight faded, I surprised myself. I told the guys I was heading out early and left. I've mentioned the road that leads to the front of our house, but there's another route, the back road. It snakes past the barn and the stables, no better maintained than the front, but I often used it to check on the animals. With the kids staying at their grandparents' that weekend, I wasn't sure if Chloe had tended to them. As it turned out, I had no reason to worry. She had everything under control. I parked by the barn and made my way toward the house. Chloe had a strict rule about tracking dirt inside, so we kept a bench on the back porch where I always switched my work boots for my bedroom slippers. That night, an early autumn breeze whispered through the open windows, her way of cutting down on the air conditioning bill. Only 10 feet of space and a thin mesh screen separated me from our den, where I could see everything yet remained unseen, shrouded in the darkness outside. I hadn't been paying much attention to the scene inside until an unfamiliar male voice pierced the silence. "You sure your husband won't be home anytime soon?" "Relax," Chloe murmured reassuringly. "Jack won't be back until Nick's closes at midnight. We have the whole place to ourselves. Until then, I'm all yours." At that moment, my world imploded. Some might call me weak, others might call me insane. I wouldn't argue with either assessment, but something inside me shifted, and I reacted in a way I never could have predicted. I'd read about men who got a thrill from watching their wives with someone else, but I never imagined I'd be one of them. And I wasn't, not in the way they were. Those men found excitement in it, some kind of twisted pleasure. What I felt was nothing but devastation. I sat there, motionless, as tears slipped down my face, witnessing the unraveling of everything I believed in. I could have stormed inside, beaten Grant to a pulp, maybe even lashed out at Chloe. But what good would that have done? This wasn't just a meaningless fling, it was her past creeping back into our present. Even if I stopped them tonight, they'd only find another time, another place, far from my reach. No, I needed evidence, proof that would hold up in divorce court. Seated on the couch, facing my direction, they gave me the perfect angle. As they kissed, I raised my phone, capturing everything, the way Grant's hands roamed over her, the way she welcomed his touch. And then I saw it, the very reason he had earned the nickname Meat. The same woman who once recoiled at my requests, calling them degrading, now showed no hesitation with him. "Damn, baby, you've got me so worked up. I need to get this in you," Grant murmured. I snapped more photos, documenting their betrayal from every angle. I was nearly satisfied with what I had when Grant made his worst mistake. Like so many men, he couldn't just take what was given. He had to boast. "You said I was the best you ever had. That was true, right?" he asked smugly. "Of course, baby," Chloe purred. "I wasn't lying. Nothing else has ever felt this good, not since high school." His face lit up with satisfaction at her words. "And Jack?" he pressed. He's not as big as me, is he? She laughed, tracing her fingers along his chest. Oh, honey, not even close. Don't get me wrong, he tries, but it's like comparing a Volkswagen to a Corvette. She reached for a towel she must have brought in earlier, wiping herself off with casual ease. Ready for round 2? She teased. Grant didn't need any encouragement. As they started up again, my ears burned with the sound of Chloe joining in his mockery. Instead of defending me, or at the very least keeping quiet, she egged him on. No, baby, my little wimpy husband could never compare to you. They said more, but by then I wasn't really listening. My rage was white hot, my vision blurred with fury. And yet, in the midst of my seething anger, a moment of clarity emerged. I knew exactly what to do. Moving with precision, I slipped through the back door unnoticed. Grant, too lost in his pleasure, remained oblivious as I crept closer. His body moved in a rhythmic thrust, utterly unaware of the presence lurking just inches behind him. As he reached his peak, he groaned, "Here it comes, baby. Maybe you can get hubby to clean you up when he gets home." "Good idea," Chloe giggled. "I'll leave it just like this. Hell, he'll probably be so drunk he won't even notice." By then, I was close enough to reach out. My right hand hovered inches from the vulnerable sack swaying before me, my left poised near the thick ponytail he always tied with such pride. In that moment, he was mine. "How much are you willing to bet, sweetheart?" I murmured, yanking his head back with a brutal grip. The response was immediate. Grant let out a strangled gasp before his body went limp, unconscious in my grasp. My fingers remained clenched, unyielding, even as his dead weight sagged. Chloe, scrambling to cover herself, choked on her fear. "Jack, please, don't do this," she stammered, desperate. "It's not what it looks like," I scoffed. "Oh yeah? Then enlighten me, Chloe. Because from where I'm standing, it looks an awful lot like the woman I trusted has been sneaking around with her ex." "What's your excuse?" Tears streaked down her face as she shuddered. You weren't supposed to find out." "But I did," I shot back, my voice dripping with venom. Grant was nothing but dead weight in my arms now, so I let him drop, only realizing after that I still had a clump of his hair stuck between my fingers. I examined it for a brief moment, before tossing it aside like garbage. Chloe's eyes widened in terror, but she was frozen in place. Not that it would have made a difference if she ran. A shriek tore from her throat as I grabbed her, but fear had already paralyzed her. Dragging her across my lap as I sank into my recliner, I did what should have been done long ago. The signs had always been there, glaring and undeniable, but I had been too blind, too stupid to see them. Love does that to a man. Well, hindsight is crystal clear now, and the truth was unavoidable. I didn't hurt her badly, just enough to make sure she understood. When I decided she had learned her lesson, I shoved her off me, and she hit the floor with a dull thud. With a sneer, I kicked her clothes toward her. "Get dressed. Your boyfriend needs a hospital." She scrambled for her clothes, hastily pulling them on, her voice small and uncertain. Are you going to help him?" A sharp, humorless laugh escaped me. Not a chance. He made this mess. Let him clean it up. Dragging Grant's unconscious body outside, I dumped him into the back seat of her car. Before shutting the door, I couldn't resist giving him one last parting gift, a squeeze hard enough to make him let out a weak, pitiful groan before slipping under again. He wouldn't even feel the potholes on the way to the ER. Chloe hesitated as she slid into the driver's seat, her tear-streaked face turning to me. "Jack, please. We can fix this." It meant nothing. It was just a meaningless fling. I stayed silent. Maybe if it had been just that, just a mistake, we could have found a way forward. But it wasn't. She had laughed at me, humiliated me, all while betraying everything we'd built. Those words, those actions, were carved into my bones. Still, for a moment, I almost faltered. Almost. But then I remembered every story I'd heard about men who forgave, only to be called weak. That wasn't me. I refused to be that man. No, I said, my voice like iron. Not a chance. She sniffled, her hands trembling on the wheel. But I don't have anywhere to go. The way her voice cracked, the way her sobs shook her shoulders, might have swayed another man. But not me. She played her last desperate hand. If you forgive me, I'll tell the cops Grant just fell. I'll swear it was an accident. I stared at her. Cops? What cops? I caught him with my wife. There won't be a trial. He got what he deserved. And with that, I turned away. I listened as the engine sputtered to life and faded into the distance. That was the last I'd see of her, I told myself. The final chapter of this miserable story. That night, I slept like a man free of chains. By morning, her things were gone from the porch. A clean slate. First on my agenda, finding a woman who understood loyalty, after finalizing the divorce, of course. Unfortunately, Chloe had one last surprise in store. The next day, two of the biggest cops I'd ever seen were at my door. Before I knew what was happening, I was in cuffs. Turns out, her sob story about having nowhere to go was just that, a story. Things went from bad to worse when I tried posting bail and discovered that she had drained our joint account months ago. With nothing left, I was stuck with a public defender, some fresh-faced kid who looked like he'd never handled anything bigger than a parking violation. The DA spun the narrative, painting me as an unhinged monster who had brutalized my poor, innocent wife and her old classmate. The judge, though, had seen the photos, though he didn't let the jury see them. That little mercy was the only reason my sentence got knocked down to 3 years, with the possibility of probation if I signed over the house and land to Chloe. I hesitated, but in the end, I signed. Why? Because I knew what waited for me in prison. One guy like Cletus I could handle, but a whole block full of them? Not a chance. Now, I live in a modest place by the lake. It's nothing luxurious, but I've made it comfortable, with my own money, of course. It's a roof over my head and a home for the kids when I have them on weekends. And since both my family and my former in-laws took my side, I still get a decent home-cooked meal more often than not. I still enjoy reading about love and betrayal, but I don't waste time on people who claim they would have done things differently. Let me tell you, pull a stunt like that in today's world, and you won't walk away without paying the price. My friend, and this is the end of the story. If you liked this story, then put your royal like and subscribe to the channel. May the force be with you. Greetings, my dear viewer. This is a channel about marital infidelity and about the consequences if one spouse starts to cheat on the other. If you, as well as I do, support true family values and condemn cheating, then subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. Let's get started. I never thought I'd be the kind of man who got played. Not me. I wasn't gullible, wasn't weak, and I damn sure wasn't the type to sit back while a woman made a fool of me. But life? It has a way of pushing a man, testing his limits just to see if he'll bend, or if he'll set the whole damn thing on fire before it comes to that. Her name was Penelope. Blonde hair that caught the light just right, legs that went on forever, and a body that could make a holy man reconsider his faith. The way she looked at me made it easy to believe I was the only man in the world, the only one who mattered, the only one she truly wanted. Maybe that's why I let my guard slip. Maybe that's why I let her in, even when every instinct in me screamed to keep her at arm's length. I met her 5 years ago, in a dimly lit bar, back when I still had the patience for mindless conversation. She was nursing something expensive, ignoring the men circling her like vultures. But when I passed by, she met my gaze, steady, defiant, like she was daring me to make a move. So I did, and soon enough, she was mine. Or at least, that's what I believed. We tied the knot in Vegas, half drunk and reckless, the way all the biggest mistakes begin. I had money, ran my own business, took care of things the way a man should. She never had to lift a finger. I gave her everything, the house, the car, a life most women would kill for. And for a while, she played her part well. She was sweet, devoted, insatiable. But some women don't know the meaning of enough. Some look at everything they have and still want more. It started small, late nights with her so-called friends, a sudden obsession with the gym despite never having stepped foot in one before. Then came the phone, always face down, never out of reach. I wasn't a fool. I saw the signs. And then one night, she sat across from me at dinner, her fingers circling the rim of her wine glass, that same smug smile she had the night we met. "I have something to tell you." I leaned back, waiting. "I'm going to see another man for a while," she said, just like that. No hesitation, no guilt. "We'll still sleep together, of course, but I'll also be with other men." I didn't flinch. Not because it didn't hurt, it did, but because I was deciding what kind of man I was going to be in that moment. She cocked her head, waiting for me to yell, to beg, to demand answers. I didn't. Instead, I smiled. Slow. Easy. The kind of smile that must have made her think I was okay with it. "All right," I said, "if that's what you want." That was it. She went to bed that night thinking she'd won, thinking I had accepted it. She had no clue what was coming. Penelope didn't just take my love for granted. She treated my entire life like it was hers to destroy. I wasn't born into comfort. No trust fund, no safety nets, just grit and fury. My father was a violent drunk, the kind of man who let his failures bleed out through his fists. I learned young that the world didn't give second chances. You either took what was yours or got crushed by someone who would. By 16, I was already fighting. Bare knuckle, underground, cash in hand before sunrise. It wasn't sport, it was survival. Every fight was a step away from the life I was born into, and I never lost. That kind of life carves a man out of stone. By my 20s, I had built something from nothing, my own security business, protecting the wealthy from the kind of men I used to run with. It paid well. It gave me control. Then came Penelope. She wasn't like the others. She never flinched when I spoke, never cowered when I pushed. She was fire wrapped in silk, and I mistook it for passion instead of what it truly was, destruction waiting for its moment. We married fast. Too fast. A wild night in Vegas, too much whiskey, and suddenly she had my last name. But I didn't regret it. Not then. She was mine, and I took care of what was mine. When our son Floyd was born, everything changed. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for him. He was my blood, my future. I taught him strength, resilience, how to stand when the world tried to knock him down. Every lesson I learned the hard way, I gave to him freely. I worked my ass off to make sure he'd never know hunger, never know fear, never feel the desperation I had once known. And then Penelope burned it all to the ground. The cheating? That was one thing. But what she did next, that was the real betrayal. The night after she dropped her little confession, she came home late, probably thinking everything would go on as usual. She strutted in, heels clicking against the hardwood, expecting me to be there like a loyal dog. But the house was empty. Not just my things, everything. The furniture, the electronics, the cash in the office safe, even the food from the fridge. I took it all. She didn't just lose me that night. She lost everything I had ever given her. And Floyd? He was already gone. I picked him up from school before she even realized what was happening. She wanted to play around? Fine. But not under my roof. Not with my son there. She called me, screaming. I let the call ring out, sending it straight to voicemail. Then came the messages, frantic appeals, followed by venom-laced threats, and circling back to desperate supplication. I remained silent. The following day, she stormed into my office, hands slamming against my desk, her face twisted in fury. Her eyes, wild with rage, locked onto mine. "What the hell did you do?" I leaned back in my chair, unshaken, calm, unmoved. Exactly what you asked for, sweetheart. You wanted to be free, didn't you? You said you'd be with other men. So I made sure you had all the time in the world for it. Her expression darkened, her breath hitched, and her fingers curled into trembling fists. You took my son. Our son, I corrected, my voice even. And I'm the only one actually being a parent here. That's when she lunged, nails bared, ready to tear into me. I caught her wrists midair, twisting just enough to make her flinch. I don't hit women, I said, my tone steady, cold. But try that again, and I won't be so gentle next time. Her breath came in short, uneven gasps, pupils wide. Was it fear, or had reality finally set in? Either way, I let go. She stumbled back, rubbing her wrists, her face burning with frustration. You can't do this. I'll take you to court. I smirked. Be my guest. You'll lose. I've got the best lawyers money can buy. And you've got nothing. That was the end of it. She wanted independence, and now she had it. No home, no family, no son. Just an empty house and a cold bed she'd have to share with whatever man she thought was worth the cost of her self-destruction. Penelope was never foolish. Self-serving? Absolutely. A liar? Without question. But stupid? Not in the slightest. She had known exactly what she was doing that night when she sat across from me, swirling her wine glass, casually confessing she'd be seeing other men. She expected outrage, accusations, a screaming match where she could twist the story, frame herself as the victim, maybe even manipulate me into some perverse open marriage arrangement. But I didn't give her the reaction she wanted. Instead, I took everything from her. And that's when I saw it, the dangerous truth about her. She wasn't the type to accept defeat. For weeks, silence, no texts, no calls, nothing. Almost as if she had disappeared. But I knew better. Penelope wasn't done. She was planning. She had always been a master at getting what she wanted. Long before me, she used her charm, her body, her carefully crafted vulnerability to manipulate men. She knew how to stroke egos while secretly pulling the strings. But with me, she had no control, and that's what pushed her over the edge. She hadn't been unfaithful because she was unhappy. She did it to prove that no man, not even me, could ever own her. When I stripped everything away, I didn't just humiliate her. I shattered the illusion she had built around herself. And like any cornered predator, she struck back. Hard. It started subtly. A call from my attorney. We have a problem with your accounts, he said, voice strained. They've been frozen. My grip tightened around the phone. All of them? Every last one. I didn't have to ask who was responsible. Penelope. Before I walked away from that marriage, I made sure she wouldn't see another cent from me, cut her off completely. But she had found another way to retaliate. Turns out, she had been laying the groundwork long before she ever admitted to her affairs. While I was out building my company, making sure she never had to work a single day in her life, she had been weaving a trap. Fake allegations, manufactured stories, claims of financial abuse, emotional manipulation, and the deadliest accusation of all, that I was a danger to my son. At first, I laughed, a bitter, hollow laugh. She can't win this, I told my lawyer. He didn't laugh. She doesn't need to win. She just needs to drag it out long enough to destroy you. And she did. The next blow came fast. My business, the empire I built from nothing, suddenly found itself under scrutiny. False reports, legal threats, clients backing out to distance themselves from a man accused of domestic issues. Even my employees, the ones who had been with me for years, began to hesitate. Their glances shifted, their trust wavered. That's when I realized just how deep her betrayal ran. She hadn't done this alone. No, she hadn't simply slept with any random man. That would have been too easy, too predictable. She had gone after someone closer, someone I trusted. Samuel. My best friend. The man I once bled alongside in my street fighting days. The man I brought into my company, made my right hand, gave a future to. And all along, he had been screwing my wife behind my back. This wasn't about infidelity anymore. This was war. If Penelope thought she had won, she had no idea what was coming next. She had stripped me of everything, my business under attack, my accounts locked, my reputation dragged through the filth by the woman who once shared my bed. But the part that set my blood on fire? She was coming for my son. Penelope wasn't satisfied with stripping me of my wealth, my standing, my livelihood. No, that wasn't enough. She craved more. She wanted to take Floyd from me, to tear out the last shred of my existence and leave me hollow in the wreckage. And she wasn't acting alone. She had Samuel, my so-called best friend, the man I had trusted beyond all others, the one who had sat at my table, held my child, stood beside me as if he were family. All while sneaking behind my back, conspiring with my wife, feeding her poison, helping her dismantle my life piece by piece. But the true betrayal, the one that drove the knife deep into my gut. Samuel wasn't just sleeping with Penelope. He was coming for my son. The court papers landed like a hammer to the chest. Petition for sole custody. Penelope and Samuel, unified against me, painting me as unfit, a danger to Floyd. They dredged up my past, twisted it, manufactured evidence to back up their claims, fake police reports, false witness statements from strangers, photographs of bruises marring Penelope's skin, marks I had never put there. Wounds she had likely inflicted on herself to sell her narrative. And Samuel, the smug snake, had the audacity to claim he had been more of a father to my son than I ever was. Rage consumed me. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about annihilation. And I knew one thing beyond a shadow of a doubt. If I played by the rules, I would lose. Penelope had the courts in her pocket. She had the lies. She had Samuel. So I threw away the rule book and made my own. First, I had to send a message, one that would make them realize just how much they had underestimated me. Samuel was the easiest target. Too easy. He had grown comfortable, thinking I was too preoccupied with legal battles to retaliate. He still went to the same gym, still carried himself with that undeserved arrogance, like he hadn't just stabbed his closest friend in the back. That night, when he stepped into the parking lot alone, I was waiting. I let him see me, let the fear settle in. Watching the color drain from his face, that was my first victory. "Hey, man," he muttered, hands up, as if that would stop what was coming. I didn't let him finish. One punch, a clean, decisive strike to the jaw. His head slammed against the pavement, and he crumpled like dead weight. He tried to crawl away, but I wasn't done. I crouched beside him, tangled my fingers in his hair, forced him to meet my eyes. "You think you can take my son?" My voice was calm, deliberate. "Think you can sleep with my wife and just walk away?" He whimpered, blood trickling from his nose onto the asphalt. I didn't care. I leaned in closer. "You're going to drop that custody case." His breath hitched. I can't. Penelope, she..." My grip tightened around his throat. Not enough to choke, just enough to remind him who he was dealing with. "You're going to drop it," I repeated. "And then you're going to disappear." His eyes darted around, frantic, searching for an escape. "You're crazy!" he spat through bloody teeth. I smiled. "You have no idea." Then he ran. Just like that, my so-called best friend, the man who thought he could take everything from me, became nothing more than a ghost. Penelope was next. I could have handled her the same way, could have waited in the dark, made her feel the same helplessness she had forced on me. But that would have been too easy. Penelope didn't fear pain. She feared losing control. She thrived on manipulation, on being the one pulling the strings. So I cut the strings. I dismantled her completely. First, I exposed everything. The affair, the falsified reports, the carefully woven lies. I hired investigators to dig through her past, unearthing every ugly secret she had tried to bury. And then I made sure the truth reached everyone: her family, her friends, her job, the court. No one was left in the dark. Her credibility shattered. Her support network collapsed. The pristine image she had so meticulously crafted? Gone. And when she was left standing in the ruins of her own deception, when she had nowhere left to run, I took Floyd, legally, permanently. The judge saw through her act, saw the inconsistencies, the fabricated evidence. Her case disintegrated like sand slipping through her fingers. When the final ruling came down, full custody was mine. Penelope stood in that courtroom, shaking, unable to believe she had lost. She fought, she screamed, she cried, she begged, but I didn't spare her a glance. Penelope was no longer my concern. She was nothing, and I had won. After that, she vanished. No desperate messages, no veiled threats, no empty apologies. She had been broken in a way she had never experienced before. But I knew Penelope. She didn't know how to accept defeat. So when I came home late one night and saw my front door slightly ajar, I wasn't surprised. I stepped inside, slow, controlled. The house was dark, but the air carried something faint, familiar. She was here. Her fragrance still clung to the air, a ghost of the past stirring long-buried memories. The moment I stepped inside, I twisted the lock behind me. If she'd managed to slip in, she wouldn't be leaving the same way. A shadow wavered in the dim hallway, followed by a voice, soft, almost fragile. I just wanted to see him. I exhaled slowly, rolling my shoulders, letting my fingers crack as I flexed them. Floyd isn't here. Silence. Then she stepped forward into the weak glow spilling from the kitchen. She was a shell of the woman I once knew. Her makeup was smudged, her blonde hair a tangled mess, as if a brush hadn't touched it in days. This wasn't the Penelope who used to carry herself like royalty. This was someone teetering on the edge. Her fingers trembled around a folded piece of paper. "I wrote him a letter," she murmured. "Just let him read it." I didn't reach for it, didn't even shift. "He doesn't need anything from you," I said, my voice devoid of sympathy. Her eyes flickered, something sharp and cutting beneath the sorrow. "You took everything from me." I tilted my head slightly. "You did that to yourself." Her throat bobbed as she swallowed hard, pressing her lips together to keep them from quivering. For a brief moment, I almost believed she was truly broken. Almost. Then she smiled. That was when I knew. This wasn't about Floyd. She hadn't forced her way in just to drop off a letter. She was testing me, seeing if she still had a hold over me, if she could manipulate me, pull me back into the past. But I wasn't that man anymore. So she adjusted, slipping into the role of the wounded lover. "I loved you," she whispered. A dry chuckle nearly escaped. "No, you loved control. And when you lost it, you lost yourself." Her fingers clenched into fists. For the first time, she looked small, fragile, like she was only now realizing the full weight of what she'd lost. And then, the truth spilled free. "You really think this is over?" Her voice was barely above a breath. "You think taking my son, my life, my name was enough?" I met her stare, unwavering. "It's over, Penelope." She shook her head, her lips curling into something twisted, desperate. "No, baby." She licked her lips, eyes gleaming with something dark and dangerous. "It's just beginning." That's when I caught it. A faint red light, blinking. My eyes barely flicked toward the corner of the room. A camera, hidden between the cabinets, its lens reflecting the soft glow of the kitchen. I turned back to her. She was watching, waiting. She wanted a reaction, wanted me to snap, wanted me to give her something, anything, that could be twisted into evidence. A final trap. I smiled. "You should leave, Penelope." Her expression wavered. "What?" I stepped forward, slow and deliberate, not aggressive, just enough to shift the air between us. You broke into my house, planted a camera. Thought you could bait me, I said smoothly. And the best part? You actually believed I'd fall for it. Her breath caught. I leaned in slightly, my voice low. You lost. Go home. Her whole body went rigid, trembling with barely contained fury. She wanted me to break, wanted me to lash out. But I gave her nothing. She staggered back, wild-eyed, lips parted like she had one last thing to say. But she didn't. With a sharp pivot, she spun on her heel and bolted. The door slammed behind her. I stood still, listening to the silence settle. Then I walked to the cabinet, reached up, and plucked the tiny camera from its hiding place. Without hesitation, I crushed it in my palm. Checkmate. Penelope had lost. She just didn't know it yet. Every move she had left was crumbling. Her fight for Floyd had fallen apart before it even started. Samuel, gone. He had always been too much of a coward to stand by her, and now, with her pathetic little scheme exposed, she had no cards left to play. But I wasn't naive. A woman like Penelope didn't just fade away. So I stayed ready, kept my defenses up, had my lawyers tracking her every move, even hired private security to watch Floyd at school, just in case. And then, exactly 1 week later, she made her final move. The last betrayal. It was 2 a.m. when my phone buzzed, an unknown number. I answered, already expecting one of her slurred voicemails. But it wasn't her. Mr. Clements? A measured voice on the line. This is Detective Westbrook with the NYPD. We need you to come down to the station. My pulse tightened. Why? A pause. It's about Penelope. My gut clenched. I grabbed my keys and walked out. The final lie was waiting. Inside the envelope, a series of photographs lay in stark detail. Penelope, her face bruised, deep lacerations marking her arms, a split lip, an image of suffering meticulously crafted. A complete fabrication. Yet, the accusation it supported carried weight. Attempted murder. The interrogation room felt smaller with every passing second, silence pressing against me like a vice. She claims you broke in and attacked her, the detective said, studying me with unrelenting focus. Says you threatened to kill her. I exhaled slowly. Penelope's last desperate gambit. Leaning back, I met his gaze evenly. And do you believe that? My voice was calm, unwavering. A flicker of hesitation passed through his expression, brief but telling. Then the door swung open. My lawyer entered, and with his arrival, the charade unraveled. Penelope's carefully constructed lie couldn't withstand scrutiny. No evidence, no eyewitnesses, and, most damning of all, she had overlooked the security cameras in her own building. The footage told the truth. She had entered her apartment alone. No forced entry, no struggle, not a trace of me anywhere. Instead, it showed her clawing at her own skin, manufacturing injuries, assembling a crime scene from thin air. The moment the detectives reviewed the footage, the case against me collapsed. Penelope wasn't the victim. She was the perpetrator. The last time I saw her was in the courtroom. Her wrists were bound in cuffs, her expression blank, eyes hollow. The judge listed the charges against her: filing a false police report, trespassing, attempted fraud. She never looked my way, never spoke. She didn't need to. She understood it was over. And me? I stepped out of that courthouse with Floyd beside me, free. Penelope had become nothing more than a shadow of the past, a mistake left behind, and finally, she was gone for good. My friend, and this is the end of the story. If you liked this story, then put your royal like and subscribe to the channel. May the force be with you.